Hello everyone and welcome to R2-SHE2, my Star Wars podcast. My name's Neve and I have threatened to make a Star Wars podcast for years, and after some much needed encouragement from some truly wonderful friends and family, I have finally decided to unleash my eagerness to do it and burden you all with my nonsensical, emblazoned ranting about wizards in space. I don't doubt that at least some of the encouragement was more a way of people getting me to stop ranting at them about Star Wars and instead channel it into something more productive that people might actually want to listen to, but I'm grateful all the same. I really have been blown away by the support that I've received so far. Everyone has been so kind since I first announced I was going to do this, and it's only made me so much more excited to get started. I certainly would not have the confidence to be doing this if it wasn't for all the lovely messages that have so far been sent my way. It really does mean so much to me. And an even bigger thank you if you're actually listening to this. I find it really difficult to believe anyone would actually want to listen to me and my either extremely standard or extremely controversial opinions on this franchise. I mean, usually people around me don't actually have the choice and I thrust it in their faces and force them to listen, but it really is so heartwarming and encouraging to think that someone might be out there. I see this podcast as a chance for me to rant about Star Wars and explore everything and anything to do with the galaxy far, far away, and there's certainly plenty of it to do so. Particularly, I am hoping to focus on character analysis and development, as that's something I've always been intrigued and inspired by, but also I want to explore what it means to be a woman both in the Star Wars universe and in the fanbase. I don't think it's something that's talked about very much, or at least certainly not as much as it should be. And in a way, I think it's a shame that there are even conversations needing to be had about the way that women who have the audacity to be interested in Star Wars are perceived and interacted with. I'm hoping to be an example of women being into Star Wars. I'm not sure where this strange misconception came from that women are only interested because of attractive men or even trying to impress guys. And I really don't want that to sound as if I'm trying to be an example, as in leading women who are into Star Wars. I just want to add to the voices of the many women out there who are struggling to be heard over the often overwhelming surge of misogyny and patronisation that can be out there. I really want this podcast to be a safe space for anyone and everyone who likes Star Wars or is at least intrigued by the franchise, people who haven't necessarily discovered the extent of their love for it yet. And I really want this to be a platform to support Star Wars creators, both professionals and fans. And speaking of that, I do have a few disclaimers that I want to make before we get into the crux of my podcast. So first of all, I am a complete novice to podcasting. I'm learning about setup and sound and presentation and content and all these things that I'm really hoping to pick up as I go. I'm also not trying to claim to be anything other than a Star Wars fan. I'm not in any way trying to portray myself as some all-knowing sentient when it comes to the Star Wars universe. I know what I know, I don't know what I don't know, and I really am only doing this for fun. If anything, I think this podcast is a great way for me to learn as much as I think anyone listening to this can learn from me. I'm not really sure where this podcast is going to lead me, if even anywhere at all, but I really am excited to share my love for Star Wars with anyone that's willing to listen. So if anyone does have any constructive feedback or just wants to start a conversation with me based on anything that I've said or will say in any of these episodes, then I more than encourage it. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at R2-SHE2 podcast. There's also links to my other social medias on those pages, including my TikTok account, where I seem to enjoy embarrassing myself with silly little videos that aren't very funny at all. But being on these social medias really has helped my confidence and affirmed how much I want to be actively involved in this community, because it can be a truly wonderful place to be at times. Most of the time. So definitely make sure to find me on those. I also just want to make clear that I'm a fan of all things Star Wars. Of course I have my preferences to things, but I genuinely do love it all. The originals, prequels, sequels, anthologies, TV shows, animation, books, comics, games. I just love this whole universe so much. And one thing in particular that I really love about it is hearing other people's personal stories with Star Wars. Everyone has a Star Wars story, even if you aren't as exposed to it or as passionate, especially if you're in a 3-mile radius to me. I've likely forced it upon you at some point by constantly referring to it and ranting about it. But Star Wars has impacted everyone in some sort of way, even if you don't realise it. So I thought it would be a really good idea to use this introductory episode to explain a bit about my connection to the franchise, and hopefully through that you can get a sense of who I am and what exactly it means to me. Star Wars means a lot of things to a lot of different people. It's always been in my life, and I know I was introduced to it at a very young age. Now, I don't actually have clear memories of my first time viewing the films like most people do. Star Wars is just something that's always been there. I really wish I had those memories. I always love hearing other people recounting the first time they watched the films, but I was born in the same year as The Phantom Menace coming out in 1999, and so I was very young when the prequels were released. I wish I could remember seeing Anakin turn for the first time and my little heart being absolutely broken, but I was simply too young. So, as I was saying, Star Wars was never something necessarily awakened in me, and not to quote Raid too early on in these podcast episodes, but something inside me has always been there and now it's awake, and that something is my Star Wars obsession. So, I was always an imaginative child. I was raised on films and stories, so things like Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Narnia, Doctor Who, and Star Wars definitely also influenced me in that sense. I can remember playing it in the playground at school and wanting to be an X-Wing pilot, and as sad as it might be to admit, I never really had my own original imaginary friends. I used to imagine being on adventures with the characters that I was seeing or hearing about in these stories. So, for example, Leia. I remember thinking she was my sister because we both had brown hair and that's how things work when you're a kid. So, it wasn't really until The Force Awakens came out in 2015 when I was 16 years old that I realised just how much I loved Star Wars and the impact that it had on me growing up, shaping me into who I was then and certainly am now. I suppose as a kid, I didn't actually have access to many TV channels besides the standard British satellite shows, so I didn't grow up watching things like the Clone Wars or anything else like that, which I think is very unfortunate, as nothing new that was Star Wars related was really released between my ages of 6 and 15. So because of that, other things became my more active passions, so other media and nerdy things. Star Wars then became quite overshadowed. But with the growing hype for the sequels being released after the Disney takeover, I started to feel my love for it growing and growing as I became more intrigued by and involved with the announcement of the cast and the characters and the theories people were posting online and the trailers and all of it. That's when I decided to watch shows like The Clone Wars and read some novels and comics, all building my hype for Star Wars, which has always been there, but it definitely brought it to the forefront. And so I consider The Force Awakens probably the most pivotal moment in my story with Star Wars. As I said, I don't really have memories of watching the earlier films for the first time, so it was so special to me to be able to go to the cinema with my dad and my mum and my brother and watch that film in 2015. For that reason, the sequels will always hold a special place in my heart because, to me, that's my Star Wars. And Star Wars is a franchise so enriched and beloved because of nostalgia and personal memory and experiences attached to it. So the sequels are definitely something I hold very dear. And I think something that I then came to realise about Star Wars as a story that I love so much is that Star Wars is all about hope. I know, groundbreaking, right? I bet you've never heard that one before, and I bet I've just completely shattered your whole understanding of the franchise. But Star Wars really is about the fact that anyone from anywhere can do anything, and I think that's such an important thing to explore and inspire within people. You know, you can be a Jedi, a princess, a pilot, bounty hunter, stormtrooper, engineer, market seller. Anyone can be a hero. And I don't even mean in the big sense like blowing up a Death Star, but in the everyday victories and small acts of kindness. In Star Wars, anything is possible. Even just the phrase "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away" suggests so much. It incites curiosity, it encourages possibility. It makes you want to explore everything and anything that you can. So while it may be set in the stars with fish people and silly names and laser swords, the stories are universal, the journeys of the characters are relatable. With Star Wars, there genuinely is something for everyone. So whether you're into the films, the games, the shows, animation, comics, novels, props, characters, music, the practical processes of filmmaking, there is going to be something for you to enjoy. And for me, to see such a wide, diverse group of people with such a wide, diverse range of preferences and opinions to all be united by one thing, that being their love for the same franchise, I really think that's such a beautiful thing, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. Of course, there are some people who can't seem to see that and don't know what it means to have a personal opinion, but I'll definitely save that one for another discussion in a future episode. I'd rather not lose any listeners before we even get started. But most of all to me, Star Wars teaches the values of storytelling. What I mean by that is there's so many elements of it that are universal. Heroes, monsters, love, prophecies, they're all things we can recognize. They transcend barriers put up by language or geography or upbringing. Stories, especially the ones told by Star Wars, warn us of the dangers of political agendas, the importance of free will, of doing what's right and sacrificing yourself for something bigger, fighting for what you believe in, the need for patience, love, our balance with nature. All of that confirms our ability as humans to share our wisdom and experiences, not just in the stories, but as a fan base and in our everyday lives. I certainly believe that stories stick with us more so than the truth, and Star Wars in that way is a modern myth. It teaches us how to live. We need these stories of humanity, even if they are being told through a medium with Wookiees and droids and the Force and all those other unlikely fantasies. Something else that fascinates me is just the sheer scale of the Star Wars universe. It always keeps me wanting to go back for more because there's so much to learn, so much to debate and love about it. There's always going to be a story to relate to, a character to relate to. As I said, there really is something for everyone. Whether you enjoy the content that Star Wars puts out or not, the cultural impact of Star Wars is absolutely unparalleled. No matter what you think of the quality of their content or their production, what would a world without Star Wars actually look like? There would be no Lucasfilm or ILM, likely no era of video adventure games, and definitely little sensation for science fiction. I mean, Harrison Ford would still be a carpenter, and what a loss that would be! And Disney would certainly not have the world domination that they have today, and while some of you may be happy about that one, my point is, personal experience aside, and looking at Star Wars objectively for what it is as a film franchise, I'm just completely fascinated by how something can have so much of a global impact on so many different aspects of our life over the 4+ decades that it spanned. One way that it's had a personal impact on my life is it's definitely inspired me to want to tell stories. I've always been someone who's had an interest in film, but being so inspired when watching these films and TV shows and stories, and then reading books and watching behind the scenes documentaries about them, it's all turned me towards wanting to pursue that for myself. The Force Awakens in particular was an epiphany moment for me. Seeing what was possible in that film and how much I connected to it and enjoyed it, it definitely inspired me to look further into the industry and the construction of characters and story and practical effects and the unlimitations of film as a storytelling medium. I'm sure that's a very similar experience to people who watched the originals when they first came out, and the same with the prequels. I am at a very vital and very scary time in my life in terms of pursuing a career and choosing what way I want my life to go. And while I don't really have any idea about what I do want to do, I always find myself being drawn back to storytelling. As I said before, I really have grown up on stories and they've definitely shaped me. So if I was to eventually end up doing what I enjoy, I know I would have Star Wars to thank for that. Something else that I think is so wonderful about Star Wars is the generational aspect of it. Every generation has its own Star Wars story, and that's not to generalize and say if you're older you like the older stuff or the other way around, but we all have so many memories linked to it, especially from our childhood, and that nostalgia is what drives the franchise. It what keeps people of all ages coming back for more, what makes parents want to introduce it to their kids. So seeing The Force Awakens with my dad, knowing he used to be such a big fan himself at my age, was a really emotional moment for me. And I know that's a very common experience that so many people who are into Star Wars have really fond memories of watching it with their family and friends. Star Wars has definitely brought myself and my dad closer over the years, as we will often stay up late discussing everything and anything we can to do with the galaxy far, far away. It's our thing. And so, no matter how terrible the quality of the content gets or how overexposed we become to it, I will always be thankful to Star Wars for that and will always consider it to have had such a positive, important impact on my life. Another way it's had a definitely positive and important impact on my life is introducing me to heroes that I can look up to. So let's take Rey for example, who I would argue is the character that I definitely relate to the most and has meant the most to me in a personal sense over the years. So without getting too much into depth and without getting emotional over it, Rey's longing for acceptance and belonging and her journey to learning how to value herself for who and what she is something I've really personally connected to since I first watched The Force Awakens. Just the quote from that film alone, "The belonging you seek is not behind you, it is ahead," really shifted something in me, and I think for the first time I really felt seen. As cheesy as it sounds, it's so important to anyone who feels alone or insecure to feel seen and heard and understood, represented, to be shown the ways it can go and where it can lead, what to do about it. Rey's journey taught me to be comfortable in myself and that I alone have the autonomy to control my life and where it leads and how I feel about it. So for that reason, Rey will always be an important character to me and a hero in my life. Now, that's not to say at all that me and Rey have had the same journey. I'm not as badass, I don't have magical force abilities, or at least not that I know of, but I know that a lot of my personal growth has been down to her, and I'm very proud of how much I have grown. I know just how important it was to me to see a character that's so strong and powerful and unapologetically emotional, going through very similar struggles to myself at that point in my life. Seeing them in something as popular and universal as Star Wars, it really meant a lot to me, and it always will. So not only do I consider many of the characters my heroes and find things admirable in them, but Star Wars has also introduced me to some actors and creators who are very influential in my life too. Many of them, their work and their wisdom has gotten me through plenty of troubling times. And again, this is just an example of Star Wars opening so much of the wider world to me, particularly in regards to filmmaking. Perhaps the most wholesome and fulfilling part of my Star Wars journey is the friends that I've made along the way. I've always been quite shy and quite anxious, but Star Wars really has helped me to grow in confidence. I've made so many friends because of our mutual love of this franchise, and from throwing myself into online discussions and memes and creating content together, just sharing what we love. I think it's so important for me as someone who's always been quite anxious about approaching and conversing with people to know that there is something that we have in common, and certainly something so vast and essentially endless. The richness of differing opinions and preferences just provides for such wonderful conversation, and any fan of Star Wars is always so willing and even desperate to talk about it. I am so beyond grateful for the people that Star Wars has brought into my life, and I feel as though I share something with them that's so rare to find. It's like an understanding of each other without anything needing to be pointed out or explained. Especially as a woman and as a girl, I think finding other women that are into Star Wars is the best feeling. I'll definitely talk more about our experiences in the fan base in future episodes, with hopefully a few guests too, as I would love to involve these friends who are so important to me and my love of this franchise in this podcast, especially as they're the ones who have encouraged me to get over myself and finally be doing this. But between Star Wars fans, there's just an understanding there. It's like an instant connection, little dyads being formed instantly between us. I definitely saw that on display when I was more than lucky enough to be able to go to Star Wars Celebration in Chicago back in April 2019. That was one of the most fulfilling experiences of my entire life, and something I'll definitely talk about in future episodes. As I said, I've always been quite shy, and I think being into something that most people who aren't as exposed or passionate about it would consider quite nerdy and likely immediately make a judgment of you for it, but being surrounded by that community, with everyone there being united by one love for this franchise, with the same light in their eyes, the range of enjoyment and creativity and passion on display, it really did make me fall in love with the franchise all over again, and most importantly, made me fall in love with my own love for it. I will never again shy away from my love for Star Wars. It's something that's so important to me and is essentially a part of me, and I will never apologise for that ever again. I mean, look at me now, I'm hosting my own podcast about it. And that's just an example of how much Star Wars has helped me to be comfortable in myself and grow. In regards to Chicago, nothing will ever beat the feeling of our friend group stood on the convention floor holding hands together and crying while the Rise of Skywalker trailer played for the first time. Just being in that place with those people, it's a truly indescribable feeling, and something that would never have happened to me if not for Star Wars. That memory of that experience is something that's very dear to me, as I've carried that feeling with me, that freedom to be myself, to not be insecure about things that I don't need to be insecure about. There are other people out there that understand, there always will be, and I will definitely always carry that realization with me. Like I said, look at me now, look at what I'm doing, what I'm achieving, and how much fun I'm having doing it. I think the thing that's most relatable to Star Wars fans in terms of what we love about it is the escapism aspect. No matter what is going on in my own life, no matter what's getting me down, All it takes is the pressing of a button or the flicking of a page, and I'm there, in that universe, lost among the stars on some great big adventure. I don't think any franchise will ever compare to it in terms of world building. There's just so much to explore, so much to think about and consider and learn. And that's such a wonderful thing, especially for someone like me who's prone to overthinking and focusing too much on insecurities. To have this other place that you can get lost in is so important and so valuable to me. To be able to throw myself into a world that's so far from our own, but also so familiar too, one that you can be anything in, you can achieve anything, anything's possible. And I think that definitely sticks with me and transfers into my real life. I am capable of so much more than what I believe I'm constricted by. There are no limits, there's only possibility. As I said before, no one can ever take that feeling away from me. I, as anyone, have been through some really terrible dark times in my life, but Star Wars has always been there. It's a constant. And that might be strange for someone to hear if they don't identify with finding comfort in the fictional, but Star Wars personally is something so much more than that. It might just be a story, but what has formed from that for me is so special. The community, the inspiration, the memories, it's so much more than just a story. It's personal to me. And it just means so much. And I know so many other people out there that can relate to that. Especially recently with coronavirus and lockdowns, this community has been so important to me in keeping me sane and entertained and happy. I don't think there's any shame in that. I don't think there needs to be any putting down because of that. If I'm happy, and I know it's because of Star Wars, and I know it's because of fictional things, that's me. And I don't want to shy away from that anymore. I don't want to keep apologising for it, and that's exactly why I'm making this podcast. I think it's such a shame that there are people out there that don't have a connection to something in the same way that I do with Star Wars, and they don't have something that can immediately lift them out of the dark times. And I'm just so grateful that I do have something as wonderful and endless as Star Wars to do that for me. So most of all, Star Wars brings me joy. As much as it can be confusing and disappointing and certainly even toxic at times, it makes me happy. No one, no matter how hard they try, and some definitely have, no one can take that away from me. No one can ever invalidate that. As with anything, there's something to identify with for everyone, and for me it's been so essential into shaping me into who I am today. I owe it so much. You know, the memories I have, the confidence I have, the determination, the creativity, the empathy, it's thanks to Star Wars, and I'm so grateful to everyone who has helped make that happen, from my parents first showing me the films, to the friends I've made because of it, to the filmmakers and the writers and the actors and the crew, to the characters even, and yes, in a way, even to the gatekeepers for making debates interesting and opening dialogue, no matter how hurtful it can sometimes be. I don't really think there's any way to put the impact Star Wars has had in my life into words. I think it's something that transcends that. It's so personal to so many people in so many different ways. And how can you not be fascinated by how something that is about wizards in space have that impact on so many people? As I said before, this episode's more of an introduction to me and my podcast and my personal journey with Star Wars. I will definitely be discussing some of the things that I've raised in more detail in the future, so if you would like to hear more, then definitely check out my social medias. On Twitter and Instagram you can find me at R2-SHE2 podcast, with links to my other social medias found on those pages. And if I haven't scared you off yet, then definitely subscribe so you can be notified when I next upload my next nonsensical rant. So if you have actually managed to follow my rambling and make any sense of it, then I would really love to hear from you. I'm willing to talk about Star Wars at any time, so let me know, what does Star Wars mean to you? What's your first memory of it? What's your favourite thing about the franchise? Anything, please do get in touch. I said it before, but I really do want this to be a space for dialogue and discussion, rather than me just sat here alone speaking into a microphone and wondering what exactly it is I'm doing with my life. So thank you once again for listening. I am genuinely so beyond grateful for each and every one of you that has supported this podcast in whatever way that you have, and I'm super excited to see what this will lead to. See you next time, and may the Force be with you.